It's safe to say that the Velma show was a somewhat disappointment, but after a while the expectations were lowered and it still managed to fall short of those. With the season finale rounding off an underwhelming story with an underwhelming result, a season 2 is most likely going to be airing and I imagine it will follow the same formula. However, I thought it would be worth sharing how I feel the Velma show could be saved in the second season, because I do believe it would be possible to do so. So let's get into it. Here is how to save the Velma show in season 2. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. The structure of the show. One thing that I thought was a major issue with the Velma show was the structure of it. We had one main case that needed to be solved over the course of 10 episodes, which was around 5 hours of runtime. The issue that this brought out and highlighted was the poor writing of the story and the lack of ability in being able to keep viewers engaged and wanting to find out who the killer was. One way that I think this would be able to be solved in the future season and would allow the structure and pacing of the show to improve would be by making this show an anthology series. I feel as though it would work better if each episode would have its own individual case that needed to be solved by the end of it, almost like how the original show was. However, I would also increase the runtime to around 40 minutes and make the season have between 6 and 8 episodes, and then release it on a weekly basis. I think this would allow us to see other characters in the show that would have a completely different dynamic to the ones that we spent the entirety of season 1 with. We'd see how the mysteries play out, be introduced to multiple different villains, the damaging effects of them, and then we'd also get a satisfying reveal at the end of every episode. There wouldn't be an extremely long time to wait to get an unsatisfying reveal, but you'd know before going into every episode that there would be a case that needed to be solved. This would also lend itself more to Velma actually being a detective and showcasing the abilities that she's supposed to have. This would also mean that the post-credit scene from season 1 would be redundant and not make sense, but I think it would be a small risk worth taking in order to improve the overall show. As well as having the individual cases per episode and having the anthological approach, I would also incorporate one overarching narrative that does run throughout the entirety of the season. This could be Velma and Daphne's relationship developing, or maybe even the Mystery Inc. gradually growing as a group and becoming better friends. This show is positioned as a prequel, so by seeing them all together and actually getting on, it would lend itself well to the statement that it makes. I think this would drastically improve the pacing, provide an element of excitement in wondering who Velma would be looking for every week, and actually allow us as the audience to theorize as the episode would be going on, rather than the elongated, stale, unsatisfying reveal. The use of the hallucinations. One of the only things that was strong about the first season of the show was the art style and animation of the hallucinations that Velma had. This is something that I would bring back to the show, but I'd put a twist on it slightly. The hallucinations would be a way of us seeing inside of Velma's mind and showing us that she actually has a weakness. This could be focused on the self-doubt that she'd have and the fear of not being able to solve the cases that were ahead. I would also make them be consequential, so one could occur in a serious situation and it would have a knock-on effect and ultimately lead to one of the supporting characters being in jeopardy. This would show that Velma's actions have consequences. She'd become more relatable due to having an actual weakness that many people could relate to, such as self-doubt. And by Velma being her own worst enemy, we'd see a personal battle that she'd be able to overcome. This would provide a good arm to the story where we'd get to learn more about Velma on her own, and it would also allow the show to lean in on something that could give it its own identity, something that was really lacking from the first season. It's a creepy, weird art style of hallucinations. I was really impressed with it and was gutted when it stopped as it was actually quite unique, so I would 100% bring them back and incorporate them and make them a main focus, maybe even giving them around 1/4 of the screen time due to the importance. The character dynamics. One of the main issues with the first season of the show was the characters and the drastic change that they had when compared to the original Scooby-Doo show. Many of them were very different and only resembled them due to the outfits that they were wearing. Their personalities were changed, and they were changed for the worse. For example, Fred was positioned as the incapable person who couldn't even cut his own food. Daphne was made to be in this constant love arc with Velma. Norville was painted out to be an extremely weak individual, and Velma was the most selfish character I'd seen on TV for a while. Yet they were all infatuated with her. I would alter the dynamics of the characters slightly and make them all bring something to the table. Fred could still be the most incapable person of the group, but I would give him a sense of redemption. I would have Fred still be the person that had a slight naivety to him, but I'd lose the extreme feminism arc that he adopted and just naturally make him respect women. He was quite funny and provided the comedy in the series, so I wouldn't change that. I'd just tone him down a bit. In terms of Norville, I'd make him a far stronger character and have him learn to not be so besotted with Velma. He doesn't need her in order to be a good character. He was actually a far better character when he was with Gigi for those 2 episodes. So I'd have him at the core of the show and be there to support people as and when they needed him, like we saw with Daphne, Velma, and Gigi, but it'd just be a bit more strong-minded. Daphne had a promising story, and that was when we saw that her mother and father abandoned her when she was younger. However, it was handled so badly. I'd still make Daphne the love interest of Velma, as there was a genuine love that Daphne had for her, but I wouldn't just make her whole story be centered around Velma. I'd have her actually interact with other characters and maybe even have a friendship with Norville that actually allowed the pair to bounce humor off of each other. I would overhaul Velma's character completely. I'd remove the attitude and entitlement that she emitted in Season 1 and make her more of a relatable character that treats people with respect. I'd give her an actual talent in being a detective and make her crucial to solving the mysteries. Otherwise, what's the point of her? The characters need a massive change in Season 2 of the show, and I think it needs to happen in order for it to have some kind of improvement. Don't lean into what isn't there. In Season 1, the Velma show tried to lean in on what was absent in order to make fun of it, or at least make an excuse as to why it wasn't there. For example, the Mystery Machine and also Scooby-Doo. If I were writing the show, I'd avoid doing that completely. I felt like all it did in Season 1 was shine a light on what was missing and how the show didn't have the IP, and that it wasn't through choice. Making the Scooby Project and a fake Mystery Machine just felt a tad cheap, and by not leaning in on what's absent, it would help lose the constant comparison. By taking the individual stories that would be present across the episodes and altering the characters slightly, it would allow the show to forge its own identity, something that it didn't have in the first season. It was a poorly written, non-engaging take of a show that we all loved when we were younger, and all it was solely relying on was the recognizable factors of the characters to draw us in and keep us focused, and it just didn't work. The jokes were dated, the story was stale, and it was quite literally a failure. I believe that the show can be improved in Season 2. It just needs care and attention given to it. By looking back at Season 1 as a case study of what not to do, surely we'll get a Season 2 that's better. Let's hope so anyway. So, there you have it. How to save the Velma show in Season 2. If you want to see more videos such as endings explained, theories and predictions, and character breakdowns, then click on the I button. Or alternatively, you can head over to my channel where you'll find them all. If you'd like to give me a show or movie that you'd like me to review, then head over to my Twitter, @brainpilot_, and tweet me what show or movie you'd like me to review next. And finally, if you'd like to see what I rate the latest movies that don't quite make the cut to getting a dedicated video, then head over to my Letterboxd profile. It's where I rate the latest releases in real time. Do you think the show can be saved? Leave a comment down below, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.